Thank you, sir. It's
Are
my
you
pleasure.
enjoying?
Yes, sir. I'm definitely enjoying this.
Okay, and now let's come to the point, Usman. It's great you are enjoying, and that's our aim. You have listened to Ijaz Saab. He says, no, no, the punishments are too lenient. But you, along with the majority, are satisfied. So why are you satisfied? Don't you think Ijaz Saab is right? It should be even tougher.
No, sir. I think it should not be much tougher because there is a limit for everything. No? There is a limit for every punishment.
Mhm.
So it should not be up to more than the fines or something that you can control the property. That is the correct thing, I think.
Okay.
Unless it is a, I think it is enough up to the fines and penalties. It should not go beyond this.
Okay. Fair
Unless
enough.
these fines are not one thing. If it is
Mhm.
not paid, so
It is
then we
not
can go
paid.
for that. Like person is, I mean to say, deliberately not paying. He can pay, but deliberately not paying. For example, then in that case, that is exception. Otherwise, we should not.
Okay, fair enough. That's a fair view. Thank you, sponsor. Thanks for your feedback. You can mute yourself again now. Okay, guys, so you have the perspective of the representation of our learned attendees. Let's go back to the main body that we were discussing, the Benami transaction prohibition rules. So are you guys ready for perhaps one of the most interesting sections of the rules? Section 8 deals with the confiscation of the property under subsection 1 of section 25. It states that where an order of the confiscation of property under subsection 1 of section 25 has been made, the adjudicating authority shall send a copy of the order to the approving authority. Where an order referred to in rule 1 has been received by the approving authority in respect of any immovable property, he shall, the approving authority in this regard, shall forthwith direct the administrator to proceed to take any or all steps mentioned in this sub-rule, issue notice to the concerned authority of the federal government or a provincial government or a local body or an authority or any person or officer who is responsible for recording the registration of any property. So it could be the different um, private societies, or it could be the relevant patwari, etc., etc., or maintaining its record of ownership as the case may be, having jurisdiction for the purposes of registration of such immovable property, intimating them that the property has been confiscated under the Act, and arrange to place a copy of the notice at some conspicuous part of the immovable property which is visible to all clearly for the benefit of general public, mentioning clearly there in English and in vernacular language, which is the local common language, that the property has been confiscated under the Act and vests absolutely in the federal government. Rule 3, um, sub-rule 3, or section as you want to refer to it, where an order referred to in sub-rule 1 has been received by the approving authority in respect of any movable property, he shall forthwith direct the administrator to proceed to take any or all steps mentioned in this sub-rule, forthwith issue a notice to the authority or person having the custody of such movable property, informing them that the property has been confiscated under the Act, and sell the property if the property is liable to speedy and natural decay, or the expenses for maintenance are likely to exceed its value, with the written approval of the concerned adjudicating authority, and deposit the sale proceeds in the nearest government treasury or branch of the State Bank of Pakistan, Federal Treasury, or in any bank branch of National Bank of Pakistan in fixed deposit, and retain the receipt thereof as evidence. Provided that where owner of the property furnishes fixed deposit receipt of State Bank of Pakistan or Federal Treasury or National Bank of Pakistan equivalent to the value of property in the name of the administrator, the approving authority may accept and retain such fixed deposit receipt as a security and would not need to sell the property then. provided further that where the movable property is a mode of conveyance of any description, the approving authority, after obtaining its valuation report for the motor licensing authority or any other authority as the case may be, may accept and retain fixed deposit receipt of the SBP or the Federal Treasury or NBP equivalent to value of the movable property as a security in the name of the administrator and won't need to sell it then. And cause to deposit the property consisting of cash, government, or other securities or bullions or jewelry or other valuables in a locker in the name of the administrator or in the form of the fixed deposit as the case may be in the SBP or in any branch of NBP and retain the receipt thereof. Basically, it's telling how to deal with all the various types: immovable property, cash, convertibles, movable vehicles. Cost to get the property in the form of shares, debentures, units of collective investment schemes, and instrument to be transferred in the favor of administrator, and issue a direction to the bank or financial institution as the case may be to transfer and credit the amount of money to the account of the administrator where the property is in the form of cash in a bank or the financial institution, and this is all done by the approving authority directing the administrator to do this. Whew. So quite detailed here. Now, before we talk about receipt of confiscated property under subsection 1 of section 26, do you have any questions about anything that we have covered till now? If you have any questions, I'll be giving you 30 seconds. If we don't start receiving any questions, I'll assume that you are understanding everything and we need to go back to the main presentation. Okay, so let's see, 30 seconds. Do we have any questions? So Nizam, are 30 seconds up yet?
Thank you, sir. We have an old question from Omer Zaheer.
Okay.
He says many companies get a confidentiality clause signed from their employees. Is this the way of overcoming whistleblowers?
Yes, whistleblowing is being legally protective. So no matter if somebody gets you to sign an illegal deal, that would not hold in the court of law. So for example, if somebody gets you to sign an agreement that you'll kill someone because the act in itself is illegal, by signing an agreement, it would not get any legal sanctity. So if a company asks its employees to sign something that is to cover up something illegal or to do something illegal, first, as a professional, we should not do that. Secondly, if it's a generic thing and we are not aware that it's something illegal and we sign and they are employing this to protect something illegal, now it would not hold any sanctity in a court of law. Hope that answers your question.
Rao Ali Zishan, what if the property is used for providing essential services like banking, healthcare, etc.?
Rao Saab, you also attended the session on the Benami Transaction Prohibition Act. Did you anywhere see any mention of exception? That if the property is providing essential services, then it can continue to be a Benami. So this is like a smuggler get caught and donate the smuggling proceeds. And would that make the crime legal? No, it won't. So as the law stands right now, it doesn't matter what the purpose is that is being carried out in the property at the moment, it would still be regarded as a Benami if all the other conditions are met, and the treatment should be similar. There can be a provision, I mean the government might continue to provide those services in that property, but that's a different debate. As far as the law is concerned, it's pretty clear in this regard. Next one, please.
Waqas Rafiq, I have a question regarding property. Recently, Ishaq Dar property is seized. Is this the same case, Benami property being captured by the government?
No, Vakas, I have to go through the details, but as I can recall, it's because he is an absconder. So that's a different law. If somebody gets a bail and then they don't appear before the court of law and become absconder. The court delivers several notices and reminders. There's a detailed procedure. Then they ask their guarantor, etc., etc. If everything else fails, then they start attaching their property. Plus, Mr. Dar also have some NAP cases, so it could be due to either of those. But I am pretty confident because we are keeping very up to speed with the Benami case laws, etc. Everything. It wasn't about a Benami property as far as I can recall. Hope that answers the question. Next one.
Zishan Majid, can the person pay the amount instead of property being confiscated along with fine?
No, the property will be confiscated because there is a cash 22, no? The property value will keep on increasing. But if you want to appeal, you want to do something like that, and you couldn't do that before, and you don't want the property to be disposed, meanwhile, you can pay that amount, provide the deposit slip as we discussed, and it would act as a security, and they would not dispose of the property. Next one.
Mohammad Wasim Akhtar, once proved, what will be the treatment of Benami property?
We have covered that in detail, and that's what we've been discussing. It would be confiscated by the government, in addition to the possibility of the fine as well as the prosecution and jail term. Next one.
Muhammad Anas Elias, hi. A person receives inquiry notice and asks about to tell about the property that has been sold 4 to 5 years back. Is there any time period defined by law regarding which you have to provide evidence for?
No. For Benami, there is no time bar. However, I think, Anas, you haven't attended the last session on the Act. We discussed this in detail, and I mentioned that the senior legal partner, managing partner of our firm, of the legal side, Mr. Zaheer Meer, who's been ex-legal advisor, Federal Land Commission, and a very learned personality, has filed a reference to the Lahore High Court on a point of law, which is that FPR is practically using a concept of continuing crime. It's an alien concept to Pakistani law, but it's been used in some judgments. Judgments of the nature that have been called into question. Some constitutional and political judgments. Let me put it that way. So FPR is trying to use that and say even the properties that were transacted and purchased before the enactment of the Act and were not disposed of on the date of the enactment of the Act would fall within the purview. If that happens, then all the effective time bars are removed. Otherwise, our understanding and belief is that the purpose and intention of the Act is to only prosecute from the date of Act and henceforth, and it does make a sense. A crime cannot be a crime if it happens at a time when it was not described as a crime. Otherwise, where would it end? You will keep on making laws and declaring previous instances as crime. So, for example, today you can declare your property at FBR value. Tomorrow a law comes that says declaring property value at anything less than market value is a crime. Fair enough, but that should be effective from that day onward. Na? If they say no, it would be implemented from any time in the past, that is a constitutional violation. You would say, well, I acted in line with the law that you told me was in existence. I was a law-abiding citizen. How can I be punished for something that was not a crime there? So hope you understand the point there. Anyway, with regard to providing the records, there is no time bar. Hope that answers the question in pretty much detail.
Hadi Hussain, property of deceased person comes under Benami property, question mark.
Property of deceased person. It depends if all the other requirements are met. It can be a Benami. Being deceased does not mean that the property cannot be Benami. However, it makes it less likelier, unless there are specific reasons to be investigated, but there's nothing prohibiting it from being investigated. Do we have more questions?
We have two more questions.
Okay, that's
Uh,
good. First, we were not getting questions. Now we are getting a lot of questions. But this is good because that's the best way to learn anything. Carry on, please, Nizam.
Nuruddin Behmani. If someone purchase Benami property, will purchase be penalized?
If someone purchase Benami property, will purchaser be penalized is, I believe, what he wants to ask. Obviously, when the Benami property will be transferred, if this is during the investigation period, it can't happen. And if it is transferred, then there is a possibility that um, actually this is a very complex scenario. You have to give the specifics because the answer would differ. So for example, Nuruddin, and by the way, it's a good question. So for example, Nuruddin sir, if let's say that you purchased a Benami property while it's being investigated, and for some reason the investigating officer hasn't yet attached the property. Now obviously you would be in the line of fire. Let's say you purchased it when it was not being investigated, but you were aware that it was a Benami property. You would again be in the line of fire. So there have to be the specifics, and different scenario might yield different answers. Hope that answers the question. Next one.
Rao Ali Zishan. What about accounting reporting of fine paid by a company in connection of a Benami transaction? As Benami transaction was never on the company books, how external auditors will view it?
Well, it's not purview of today's topic, but it's a good question. I'll just give you a hint. Being a qualified accountant, you have been levied a fine for a fraud. Now imagine how the external auditors will view it. The risk assessment would shoot through the roof. The sample size would increase manifold. The cost of audits and the likeliness of a qualified opinion would definitely increase. So there are many considerations that would need to be seen. How it would be booked? Cash would go out of your company's account and the fine as an expense would be booked. Simple. Next one. Nuruddin said
Hussain
yes,
Hadi.
we answered his question. Okay, good to know. And then Nuruddin thanked. You are welcome, Nuruddin. Please continue.
Hussain Hadi, can you please repeat the conditions of Benami property?
Yes, I can. But the question is why I should. Did you not attend last session? Nizam, how many times did we discuss the conditions in the last session?
Many, sir. Actually, I believe Hussain Hadi just joined today. He wasn't with us in the previous sessions.
Okay, the recording of the previous session will be available. Again, I mentioned the YouTube channel. You guys can subscribe, search my name, Omer Zaheer Meer. You'll have the recordings there. But okay, as a courtesy, I will share this. But henceforth, please focus only on today's session, the relevant question. So Hadi Saab, especially for you on your request, the prime conditions for a Benami transaction in crux are that the property should be in another person's name who is not actual beneficial owner. It should be paid by someone else, and the person who paid for it would either currently or expect in the future to receive some benefit. So these are the prime conditions. Then it's quite a detailed discussion. There are different proviso. What will happen in case of blood relation, in case of your direct descendant or ascendants, the condition to have joint accounts, etc., etc. But the prime is what I discussed with you, and I hope that answers you. Tala is saying how to view the other webinars of ACCA later. I think Tala must have joined us later because I discussed this in extensive details. ACCA send you email on quarterly basis. If you want to see it quickly, then on my YouTube channel and social media, you'll get the recordings in a few days time. If you prefer YouTube, go there, search by name, my name, and you'll have all the recordings. I think we have answered all the questions, right, Nizam?
We have, sir.
Fantastic. That's good. Let's go back to the main body of rules then. So, receipt of confiscated property. The administrator shall, at the time of receiving the confiscated property, ensure proper identification of property with reference to its particular is made in the order under subsection 1 of section 22, and with the approval of approving authority, establish one or more warehouses for the safekeeping of attached and confiscated movable property. Okay, that brings us to the question how to manage the confiscated property. Only the properties where the management expenses are expected to be very high, or where we expect that the value might decrease, or where there is a rational reason, as we have already discussed, we can dispose of the property. If these conditions do not apply, and we mean FPR officials, the government officials, are not disposing of the property, then the question should arise that how would they manage the property? What would they do with it? And how to go about that? Let's find out. So, sub rule 1 of rule 10 says where the property confiscated is of such a nature that its removal from the place of attachment is impractical, or its removal involves expenditure out of proportion to the value of the property, administrator shall arrange for proper maintenance and custody of the property at the place of its attachment. One prime example would be a house. How would you detach the house? So you have to ensure for the proper maintenance and custody of the property. If the property confiscated consists of cash, garment or other securities, bullion, gold, jewelry or other valuables, the administrator shall cause to deposit them for safe custody in the nearest government treasury or a branch of the National Bank of Pakistan or the State Bank of Pakistan. The administrator shall maintain a register for recording details in respect of such movable assets as cash, government securities, bullion, jewelry, valuables that they have deposited. The administrator shall obtain a receipt from the treasury or the bank, as the case may be, against the deposit and retain them, and shall maintain in respect of immovable property a register containing the details in the form as specified in part 2 of the first schedule of these rules, which I'll show you in a bit. But how to dispose of a confiscated property? Where the federal government has directed that the property vests under it in terms of subsection 3 of section 25, and it should be disposed of under subsection 3 of section 26, the administrator shall arrange the disposal of the property in the manner as provided for same in the Income Tax Rules 2002 to the extent applicable under this act. Okay, before we proceed, let me share with you our experience. So far, we have seen that the officers deputed under Benami are very hardworking. They are competent. Many of them, most of them have a good repute of honesty. However, one odd thing is that because they have the departmental pressure, if you have started investigating and you have used sufficient resources for that, it becomes so much difficult to go back to your senior and say what you should in that instance, because you are in a position of trust, and if something is not liable as per law, you should be able to go back and tell that. But that's in theory. Unfortunately, in practice, we have seen it's very challenging. So that's one area where the government would also need to see that even genuine cases which are not Benami otherwise, but are investigated, would possibly have to go through the appeal process, consultants, etc., to get out of this hole. So while it's very admirable that we have such a legislation to curb the menace of money laundering and illegal monies, but we need to make certain provisions in terms of safeguarding the genuine people who actually haven't committed a crime. Okay, let's move forward to rule number 12, which deals with the next forum. Okay, so the case has been decided against you and the property has been attached and all that. What can you do? Do you have a relief or not? What would you do? As we discussed in other session and more so in the last one, on the Benami Transaction Prohibitions Act, Benami Transactions Prohibition Act 2017, our constitution allows judicial remedy. It allows a person different platforms to appeal and the judicial rights. And same is the case in this set of legislation too. So an appeal